The brutal truth about the 7 angelic sins that haunt us forever. You won't believe this. The night was darker than usual, a silence wrapping the town like a heavy blanket, suffocating and thick. In the shadows, mysteries waited, threatening, inviting. Local legends whispered of 7 sins, the so-called angelic sins, and how each one surfaced at odd moments, claiming lives in ways that sent chills down spines. As Jean stumbled across the old graveyard, her heart raced. She could feel the presence of something sinister lurking among the trees, hungry for a secret to uncover. Was it truly just stories, or was something darker at play? The first strange event etched in the town's lore was the unexplained disappearance of a child some 30 years back. The parents swore they saw him in the park, laughing by a swing set, but when they approached, he vanished, leaving only the laughter echoing into the night. It felt like a cruel game, tugging at their hearts while leaving them empty, searching. Local kids dared each other to spend the night at the park, daring the ghosts of past horrors to show themselves, their wide eyes reflecting both fear and thrill. Jean balanced on the edge of a crumbling headstone. She remembered the old woman's tale about the 7th sin, gluttony. It was said that those who dared to indulge in their deepest desires became trapped in a cycle of craving, haunted by a hunger that could never be satisfied. Just last week, Mayor Thompson had thrown a feast in the town square, the air thick with the smell of barbecue and sweets. But strange things followed. People reported dreams of devouring endless piles of food, waking up in cold sweats, feeling the weight of something gnawing at their insides. Suddenly, a rustle broke the silence. Jean froze, her gut twisting into knots. The moonlight glinted off something in the shadows. Was it a figure, or just her imagination? She held her breath, every instinct screaming to run. In that moment, she felt the weight of the sins bearing down on her. Could the legends be true? Was she now entangled in a web of sin crafted by desires and secrets? Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the wind howled through the ancient branches overhead, Jean suddenly felt a tug at her sleeve. She glanced down, blood running cold. No one was there. Just the rustle of the leaves. But she could have sworn a voice whispered in her ear, "Join us." Panic surged, and she dashed back to the edge of the park. Yet, the legends were right behind her, shadowy hands creeping closer with each step. What awaited her next could bury her under the weight of the truth. And did the others hear the whisper too? The deeper she dug, the more entangled she became in the haunting mystery of the angelic sins. Jean's heart pounded like a drum in her chest as she stumbled through the overgrown grass of the park. Each shadow lunged at her as though it had life, the trees whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. She had to escape, but the darkness seemed to stretch infinitely, mocking her desperation. Then she heard it again, that soft whisper. "Join us." It clung to her ears, an invitation wrapped in sinister intent. Was it really just the wind, or something more? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting. Tears brimmed in her eyes, not only from fear but from the nagging notion that she was not just a spectator in this horror, she was a participant. Breathless, she fled toward the park exit. As she reached the gate, something flickered in her peripheral vision. She turned her head sharply, hoping to catch the figure she felt lurking behind her. Instead, she bumped into a solid form, knocking both of them back. "Whoa, easy there." The voice was familiar, a distressed but reassuring sound in the chaotic night. It was Eric, her childhood friend, who had come to the park after hearing about the haunting legends. "What the hell's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I did," she snapped, her voice trembling. Then slowly, she recounted what had happened. The tug on her sleeve, the whisper, the feeling of being chased. The stories. Eric's face paled. A mix of concern and confusion appeared. No one's supposed to be out here after dark, especially after what happened with those kids last week. You know how people are talking about gluttony, how it's coming for those who deny their desires. Jean shivered, the weight of his words crashing down on her. What if they were right? The stories weren't just tales, they were warnings. We need to get the others, she insisted, her voice strong despite the fear clawing at her insides. If gluttony is out here, we can't face it alone. Nervously, they headed down the cobblestone path to the nearby diner, Flash's Cafe. It was a popular hangout, always buzzing with life and laughter, but tonight, it loomed dark and silent like a grave. When they stepped inside, the stale smell of burnt coffee mingled with fear. The flickering fluorescent lights made the place feel all the more haunted. Empty booths lined the walls. Exchanging worried glances, they moved toward the back where the cool kids used to sit, the ones who loved to tease the legends and ignore the warnings. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, rattling plates. They jumped back, bodies tensing in unison. What was that? Eric whispered, his bravado fading. Jean felt her stomach drop. I don't know. Before she could finish, from the shadows emerged a figure, a girl with wide, frantic eyes. You have to get out. They're coming for us. Who? Jean asked, panic rising in her throat. The gluttons. They're hungry. Her voice quivered. They've taken the others. We have to leave now. If we don't. But before she could finish, the lights flickered once more and then snapped off, plunging them into suffocating darkness. Jean's breath quickened, and she could feel the sinister weight of desire pressing against her chest, a hunger she didn't understand. Was it the gluttony the legends spoke of, or was it something different? Something far worse? As chaos erupted around her, Jean felt the air turn thick with desperation. Deep in her core, an unsettling feeling bubbled. What if they were to blame for the sins befalling the town? What hidden desires festered within her? Just as the fear threatened to engulf her, she sensed something shifting at the edge of the darkness. Every instinct screamed for her to escape, but curiosity held her captive. Is anyone here? Jean dared to call, quaking as uncertainty wrapped around her like a shroud. Then, a low growl emerged from the shadows. A voice, smooth and dripping with longing, whispered, too late to run, dear Jean. You've already taken the first bite. Now she understood the true sin was far closer than she thought. The question loomed like an ominous shadow. Who would join the feast next? A sharp intake of breath filled the oppressive silence. Jean's senses overwhelmed her. The growl reverberated through her chest like a drum, and she felt the heat of another presence inching closer, its intent suffocating. Run, Eric hissed, gripping her wrist tighter than ever. But her feet felt glued to the ground, heavy with an urgency to understand the darkness lingering just out of reach. Wait, what does it mean? She pleaded, her voice nearly lost in the surrounding dread. Don't ask, he shouted, glancing back toward the kitchen. The air pulsed with something ancient and terrifying. We need to go now? Before Jean could summon the will to move, the lights flickered back to life, blinding at first, illuminating the diner in hues of ghostly white. Tables were overturned, chairs scattered across the floor. Panic etched onto the faces of the other patrons, who spilled from the corners like spilled ink. Each one wore an ashen mask of horror, but the girl had vanished. The only sign she'd been there was a faint trail of shattered glass on the floor, glimmering like stars on a midnight canvas. Where did she go? Eric panted, eyes darting around. We can't stay here. We have to find her. Jean protested, her heart hammering against her ribcage, torn between fear and an overwhelming need to help. Are you out of your mind? Look around. Eric gestured wildly. That sound. Something is out there, hunting us. A rancid scent wafted through the air, sharp and suffocating, mingling with the adrenaline surging through her veins. Jean wrestled with the prospect of leaving, but the weight of curiosity clawed at her insides. Was it madness, the need to understand? Or was it a deeper, darker hunger? Suddenly, a heavy thud echoed from the back room, followed by a deep guttural laugh that sent chills crawling down her spine. The sound wasn't human. It was predatory, like wolves celebrating after a successful hunt. Stay close, Eric said, gripping her hand like a lifeline, urgency filtering into his voice. Together, they stepped into the fray. The diner was now both a sanctuary and a trap, its walls echoing with unseen forces. As they approached the kitchen, they spotted movement outlines shifting and blending in and out of the shadows. Did you see that? Jean gasped, pointing involuntarily. Just go? Eric urged, dragging her forward. The door to the kitchen creaked ominously, almost teasingly, as they pushed it open, dread pooling in their stomachs. What lay inside would haunt Jean forever. Dismembered, ghastly remains lay strewn across the floor, fragments of what had been patrons and friends. In the flickering light, she recognized Jake's jacket, torn and stained, its vibrant colors now muted by horror. Her stomach twisted violently. What happened here? Eric breathed, his voice weak, almost fragile. I don't know, Jean whispered, backing away, the thought of gluttony clenching her heart tighter, but there was no time to process. A shadow flickered past them, large and swift. Jean's breath caught in her throat. Did you see that? Eric nodded, terror etched on his face. We can't just stand here. The growl returned, punctuated by a chorus of hissing whispers that echoed their edges. Join us, and as they turned to flee, the world spun into chaotic movement. Something charged toward them, its eyes glowing with unnatural hunger. Run, Jean, Eric shouted, but she felt the darkness wrapping around her like a blanket. She stumbled as the creature lunged, its form blurred and monstrous, driven by insatiable desire. In that heartbeat, the last remnants of her innocence faded away. The question licked at her thoughts with burning insistence. Would she submit to the gluttons, or would she fight the darkness creeping into her soul? Just then, as they burst through the kitchen door, Jean heard a voice inside her, a whisper of madness. You've tasted the fear, now you will know what it means to crave. The escape was beginning, and yet something deeper was brewing inside her, unveiling a mystery she couldn't ignore. What price would she pay to survive the night? What kind of truth awaited her just beyond the door? Would she find salvation or something far worse? The diner's front door slammed shut just as they burst through, sealing off the terror behind them. The sudden quiet felt like a weight, pressing down on Jean and Eric. Their hearts raced, pounding in their ears as they darted toward the parking lot, breathless. With each step, Jean's mind flashed through the horror they had just witnessed. Bodies scattered like forgotten remnants, the girl's disappearance. It all bore down on her with a crushing weight. I can't believe what we just saw, Eric gasped, still glancing back at the diner. What was that thing? I don't know, but we can't stay out here. Panic tinged every word. Televisions flickered in nearby apartments, unaware of the chaos. We need to find help. As they rounded the corner of the diner, a soft rustling caught Jean's attention. Her instincts screamed for her to run, but she paused, eyes narrowing at the shadows. Did you hear that? Just keep moving, Eric urged, pulling her along. But Jean felt the pull of curiosity again, stronger than before. It felt as if the darkness was beckoning her, promising answers. Before she could respond, a figure stepped from the shadows. It was the waitress, her pale face twisted in terror. You have to run, she gasped. It's coming. What do you mean? Jean's throat tightened. What's coming? But the waitress didn't answer. Instead, her gaze flicked behind them, eyes wide with fear, and she turned to sprint toward the street. The growl echoed again, deeper this time, reverberating through the chilled air like a warning bell. Follow her, Eric shouted as they stumbled after the waitress, hearts pounding. They dashed through the parking lot, desperate for the safety of the streetlights that in the distance. They could hear the sounds of chaos. A car alarm blared, mingled with frantic screams. The world felt alive with dread, a tangled mess of adrenaline and sheer horror. Where are we supposed to go? Jean cried, glancing around wildly. Eric's grip was tight on her wrist as they hit the end of the lot. Anywhere but here, he breathed. But just then, the waitress screamed, collapsing onto the asphalt. Run, she cried. But it was already too late. A shadow loomed above her, monstrous in shape, its glowing eyes narrowing with predatory joy. Jean's heart dropped. They were right back at the edge of that haunting presence, thicker now, wrapping them in a cocoon of fear. Eric, Jean shouted, her voice cutting through the other sounds of chaos. We can't leave her behind. But Eric stumbled back, biting back the words of reason. We can't help her, Jean. It will get us too. Torn between instincts, Jean hesitated. The glow of the creature grew brighter, revealing jagged teeth and shadows wrapped around its form. No, she screamed, wrenching herself free from Eric's grip. She charged toward the fallen waitress, calling out, Hang on. We're here. In that moment, the darkness surged, and all thoughts of escape fled with its momentum. Eric grabbed her arm, yanking her back just as the creature lunged, its maw wide and horrific. "Run!" he yelled, dragging her back. But Jean's eyes met the waitress, pleading, filled with something more than just fear. It was despair. And then the voice returned, penetrating her thoughts once more. "You've tasted fear now, let it consume you." As Eric pulled her away, Jean felt a war inside her. What was more terrifying, the creature or the truth that hung tantalizingly out of reach? They crashed into the street, desperate, breathless. As the dark silhouette melted back into the shadows, Jean's heart raced with a gnawing hunger for what lies ahead. Could she resist the pull, or had the darkness already seeped into her very soul? "Where do we go now?" Eric breathed, his voice trembling. "I don't know," she replied, glancing back over her shoulder. "But I can't ignore this. We have to find out what the gluttons want." The night was far from over, and the lurking shadows promised that the worst was yet to come. What truth awaited them as they sought the answers saturated in nightmares? Would they emerge with salvation, or would they be forever lost in the abyss? They stumbled away from the diner, their feet pounding against the asphalt, dragging them into the unknown. Jean's heart hammered furiously, each beat echoing her desperation. "Where do we even go?" Eric's voice was strained. He was panting like he'd run a marathon. The fear swirling around them was palpable, a living thing that suffocated their resolve. The street was eerily quiet now, broken only by distant sirens wailing like banshees in the night. Gray clouds loomed overhead, thickening the darkness, as if the world had drawn its curtains against whatever horrors lurked. I don't know," Jean whispered, each word stuck in her throat like bricks. "But we can't just keep running." Out of desperation, she turned back to the diner. "We have to help her," she said, looking at Eric, whose face reflected the city's neon lights, a kaleidoscope of fear and confusion. "No." He gripped her shoulder, desperation leaking into his tone. "We've already seen too much. You didn't see what it was, that thing. It's not human." "I can't just leave her," Jean protested, her heart torn. Maybe she knows something that could explain what is happening. The shadows danced in the corners of her vision, taunting her, urging her forward into chaos. Jean knew they needed to make a choice, but her instincts felt suffocated under layers of terror. Before Eric could respond, Jean spotted movement near the diner's entrance. A figure, thin and frantic, stumbled out into the light. "The waitress! Help, please!" she cried, her voice shrill with panic. Blood streaked her uniform, glistening like dark jewels against the pale fabric. "Jean, don't," Eric started, but she was already moving. The waitress collapsed just a few feet away from them, an injured bird in a predator's grip. It got inside," she gasped, her words rushed. "The glutton, it can enter through fear, through the mind. You too must then." As if summoned by her words, a rumble echoed, drowning out her plea. The very air trembled, charged with an electric fear. Jean felt it ripple through her skin, raising the hairs on her arms. "Run!" Eric's eyes widened with dread, and in that moment, another shadow surged from the diner, larger than life, crawling with unpredictable menace. The streetlights above flickered, faint, fighting to hold the darkness at bay. "Stay close," Eric shouted, pulling Jean along as they sprinted toward the parking lot again, memories of bodies and terror flooding her mind. "Wait," she screamed. But Jean's voice was a whisper against the roar of adrenaline and instinct. Her steps faltered, uncertainty clawed at her heart, and she nearly stopped to look back. Was it too late to help? The waitress's face reflected a wild blend of fear and desperation. "You have to face it, Jean. It feeds on fear. Only by facing your monsters can you survive." Her breath hitched, and in an instant, the glutton lunged, swallowing her scream, consuming her whole. Their world shrank to that singular moment, the waitress vanishing into the void as if she never existed, bursting the tether that had bound them to help. "Move." Eric yanked Jean forward, the shadows closing in. Panic clawed at them, and the creature's growls echoed like thunder, frighteningly close. But then a voice, cold and mocking, pierced through the chaos. "You can't run from me. Jean, you know the truth lies within you." Jean stumbled, fear suffocating, and suddenly she knew. The glutton didn't just crave fear. It thrived on pain, guilt, and her unspeakable truths. What do you mean? She shouted, her voice trembling. What truth? As they reached the end of the parking lot, the world around them began to warp. Shadows distorted, twisting into grotesque images of her past, her secrets lining up like old soldiers waiting to strike. With each step, she felt her resolve falter, her breath hitching, a lump in her throat growing heavier. Eric, she gasped, shaking her head to clear the nightmare images filling her mind. What do I do? Just as he opened his mouth to answer, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. They turned as one to see the glutton emerge, its eyes glowing fiercely in the night. Hungry for more than just fear, it craved her very essence, her darkest memories, waiting for her to submit. You have to decide. Jean Eric's voice was resolute, edged with horror and urgency. Face it or fall into it. Jean's heart raced, torn between the instinct to run and the pull of the truth she had avoided for so long. The darkness was here, alive and relentless. Would she confront her demons, or would they consume her whole? Fear coursed through her veins, setting her feet in motion. The battle within her began, and she felt the darkness beckon, more tantalizing than ever. And then, just as the creature lunged, the ground split beneath them, offering them one last choice to make. What lay beneath the surface would decide their fate. Was it salvation, madness, or something far worse? The ground fissured, its jagged edges curling like the claws of a monster threatening to drag them down. For a heartbeat, Jean teetered on the precipice, the swirling darkness below promising both oblivion and revelation. She could feel the heat of the glutton's breath against her skin, a putrid wind that clawed at her sanity. Jump! Eric cried, his voice slicing through her fog of terror. We have no choice. Jean locked eyes with him, the flame of his determination igniting a flicker of hope. The shadows writhed in the corner of her vision, but for a moment, she remembered why she had come this far, why she needed to fight. Facing the truth was not so simple, but neither was running. With one last glance at the glutton, she took a breath, a ragged gasp filled with indecision. What if it knows? What if it's waiting for me to break? It does know? That's why it's here. Eric shouted, desperation lacing his every word. But you can't let it control you. Trust me. Trust. The word anchored her in what felt like an endless abyss. In that fleeting moment of clarity, she chose not to flee into despair, but to leap into uncertainty, propelled by her desire to understand, to unearth the secrets that had haunted her for too long. Together, they jumped, hitting the ground hard. It felt like falling into nothingness, a free fall into memories that had felt long buried. The impact sent ripples through her mind as reality splintered around them. Darkness thickened like syrup, smothering their senses, yet Jean grasped Eric's hand, her lifeline amid the chaos. But the ground began to dissolve, the invisible grip of the glutton unleashing its wrath. The world twisted, revealing flashes of her past. Old heartbreaks, failed friendships, moments of regret that ripped at her heart like jagged stones. Jean! Eric's shout cut through the haze as he pointed to a figure emerging from the shadows, a reflection of her younger self, shivering with disappointment and regret. It's not real, Jean cried, her voice shaking as shame washed over her like cold rain. I left that behind. But the younger version of her whispered, you didn't. I'm still here, hiding. An icy finger of guilt lanced through Jean's chest. Memories surfaced, words left unspoken, dreams shattered. The glutton fed on those truths, morphing them into grotesque caricatures that swirled into monstrous shapes around them. With each step, Jean felt herself shifting and changing, the pull of old wounds threatening to drag her back. The thin vein of hope she clung to began to stretch, ready to snap. This can't be all there is. Face her, Jean, Eric urged, his voice firm as a lifeline. Show her that you are not afraid. You're stronger now. Stronger? Jean echoed, doubt draping over her like a heavy cloak. But as she regarded her younger self, hidden beneath layers of guilt and sorrow, an idea sparked inside her, a memory of laughter and warmth, a time before she learned to bury her pain. I'm sorry, she whispered to the manifestation of her past, stepping forward. I have to forgive you, I have to forgive myself. A surge of energy coursed through her, defying the darkness pressing in around them. With each word spoken, the shadows recoiled, the glutton's figure flickering like a candle in the wind. Jean felt their connection shatter the hold it had over her, bringing light into the claustrophobic space. But before she could grasp the salvation ahead, the shadows lunged forward, ripping violently at her resolve. "You think it's that easy?" The glutton hissed, its voice a sinister growl that felt as if it were tearing her apart from the inside. "I will show you pain like you've never known." The ground trembled, and suddenly, the twisted memories rushed in, an onslaught of pain threatening to corrupt her newfound strength. It wasn't just her past. It was the fears of every moment she had ever avoided, claws reaching out, begging her to succumb. "Jean!" Eric yelled, panic lacing his voice. "Fight it!" But Jean was paralyzed, trapped in a whirlwind of memories and self-doubt. The glutton's taunts echoed around her. The truth was sinister, pulsing beneath the surface, threatening to drown her. Could she truly face it? As tendrils of darkness closed in, Jean took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her history pressing down, yet holding onto her voice of courage. "I am not afraid. I know who I am now." Words reverberated, shaking the foundation of the illusion. Would her light be enough to push back the encroaching darkness? The shadows hissed, colliding violently around them. Jean's heart pounded louder than ever, each thud a reminder of the battle at hand. And as the darkness swirled madly, she launched herself into the heart of the storm, ready to confront not just the glutton, but the very essence of her fears. Would she emerge whole, or would the darkness claim her once and for all? The struggle had just begun. The world buckled and twisted as Jean tore through the storm of her own making, shadows clashing like thunder. Fear wrapped around her, coiling tightly, but she pushed through it. The darkness was a suffocating shroud that whispered sweet promises of despair, a promise she refused to accept. With Eric by her side, their fingers intertwined like anchor ropes against the tempest, she focused on that flickering memory, the laughter, the joy, the fleeting innocence of youth. It glimmered like a lighthouse in the stormy night. The glutton shimmered before her, a monstrous visage formed from the shards of her insecurities, but she sought the light, feeling its warmth seep into her bones. "Keep fighting, Jean." Eric's voice rang out over the chaos, a lifeline amidst the relentless tide. "Show it who you are." A surge of energy pulsed through her, igniting her spirit like an inferno. The memories warped around them, taunting her with glances of regret. But she stood firm, emboldened by Eric's unwavering support. "No, you don't own me." The glutton shrieked, a sound of pure malice, its form writhing and distorting, feeding off the chaos. "You think you can defy your own truth? I will feast on your regrets until there's nothing left." Jean's heart raced against the roar of the abyss. Regret? Yes, it lived in her bones, but it didn't define her. Drawing in every ounce of courage, she faced the looming shadow. "You're wrong. I've come too far to let you consume me. Those are just stories I've outgrown." With a determined scream, she thrust her arm forward, light erupting from her fingertips like an explosion. The light was her hope, her truth, radiating outwards with a purifying force. The glutton writhed, shrieking as the shadows recoiled from the glowing energy. Color filled the bleak expanse. The monstrous forms dissolved into swirling particles, memories transformed into butterflies that fluttered around them, bright and free. Relief washed over Jean, and she felt the weight of the darkness lifting, unraveling like threads from a once tightly wound tapestry. "Feel that?" Eric shouted joyfully, the triumph shining in his eyes as the shadows collapsed around them. "You're breaking free. Together." Jean echoed back, hope flaring in her chest like a phoenix rising from the ashes. They pressed forward through the glow, their bodies buoyed by the light of their hard-won freedom. Her past, once chains binding her, now felt light and fleeting, like dreams barely remembered. But before they could fully escape, a scream of rage echoed behind them. The glutton, wounded but far from defeated, reformed into a monstrous shape. "You may have stolen this moment, but I will find you again, Jean. You will never be free from me." Jean faltered for an instant. The monstrous figure's words clawed at her sanity, igniting a fresh swirl of doubt. Was this truly the end, or was darkness merely regathering strength for another assault? No, She channeled her resolve, her heart pounding. You are a part of my past, not my future. I choose to claim my truth. With that declaration, the light brightened, pushing against the dark tide. It wasn't just about fighting, but acknowledging and standing against the shadows that stalked her. As she felt new strength surging, she knew she could do it. But just then, everything went still. A haunting silence enveloped them, heavy and pregnant with trepidation. Jean's heart raced in her chest, the calm unnerving. What is happening? Eric breathed, scanning the expanse as the light flickered. The tremor of raw power pulsed from the glutton, stirring the air. You may have lit a torch, but the darkness will always endure, and I will always remember you, Jean. And with that, the darkness exploded around them, blinding and overwhelming, spiraling Jean and Eric into a new realm of fear and uncertainty. What awaited them here? More horrors, or perhaps an unexpected ally? The next fight had just begun, but would they be ready? The darkness lifted, and Jean gasped, her lungs filling with a distinct chill where warmth once resided. The air crackled with tension, heavy and thick, like fog rolling over a desolate landscape. She and Eric found themselves standing on a desiccated wasteland, cracked earth stretching as far as the eye could see. Where are we? Jean stammered, her voice trembling, echoing back like a whisper spiraling into the abyss. Dry wind howled around them, carrying with it a feeling of desolation that clawed at her insides. Eric squinted, scanning the horizon. I don't know, but we have to stay together. His grip on her hand tightened, grounding her in that moment. Whatever this is, we can handle it. But the uncertainty gnawed at her. A chill crept over her skin, making her shiver. The glutton, it didn't just fade away, did it? No, Eric replied slowly, dread sagging his words. That darkness is still here, lurking, waiting for us. As they moved forward, the landscape shifted. Towering shadows cast across the ground fluttered like phantoms, flickering and disappearing like candle flames in a storm. Jean's heart raced. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Then she noticed something, a series of broken mirrors gleaming in the distance, each cracked fragment reflecting glimpses of her past. Her breath hitched. The memories rebounded off the glass like echoes of regret. Distorted images of herself surfaced, mistakes replaying in an endless loop. Jean, Eric called, his voice urgent. Don't look. We can't let it pull us in. But it was already too late. The mirrors called to her, each reflection twisting her sense of self, magnifying her insecurities and failures. She saw the girl who hesitated, the young woman who doubted every decision. Every step she took, each moment of weakness amplified, turning into a cacophony of despair. I can't do this, Jean cried, her throat tightening, fear clawing at her like nails scraping across glass. Look at me, Eric shouted, forcing her gaze toward him. His eyes were alight with determination, yet laced with fear. You're not those moments. You're more than your past. But what if that past never leaves? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. What if it was always right there, waiting for moments of weakness to rear its head? I can't let them define me, she whispered, a trembling resolve beginning to solidify in her chest. Those moments made me stronger, pushed me to fight. No, I want to let them in. A sudden wind swept through the mirrors, whipping her hair into a frenzy, and shattered them into 1,000 glimmering shards that scattered around like dying stars. Each piece reflected not just her regrets, but the strength she had fought to reclaim. See, Eric said, a spark of hope igniting in his voice. You can break free of their grip. The ground shook violently, as though the past itself was shaking in anger. The gluttonous presence loomed higher, darkening the sky, its voice creeping into their minds like poison. You think you are strong enough to sever these ties? You are nothing without me. No, Jean shouted defiantly, with every ounce of courage she could muster. Those ties were meant to be broken. As she screamed, the last of the mirror shards shattered, and the darkness shrank away, retreating to the edges of the wasteland. But the glutton retaliated, a howl of rage that echoed like a thunderclap, and Jean felt the ground shift beneath her. Brace yourself, Eric yelled, pulling her back just as the earth parted open. A chasm appeared, a dark maw ready to swallow them whole. Do we jump? Jean shouted over the chaos, panic rising in her throat. No, Eric replied, a fierce determination filling his eyes. We fight. A new resolve blossomed in Jean's chest. Perhaps this was not just about escaping the darkness, but about confronting it. She felt the power of their unity within her, growing stronger by the second. Yet as they turned toward the abyss, a chilling thought settled in her mind. Could confronting the darkness actually change the narrative of their existence, or would they simply become its next victims? With the darkness stirring all around, Jean and Eric took a step forward, ready to face what lay ahead. But would they truly emerge as victors, or was it just the beginning of a deeper, darker truth? Jean's heart thundered in her chest as she faced the gaping maw of the chasm. The darkness seemed to pulse, alive and eager, and she could almost feel its breath press against her skin. "Eric, what do we do?" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. The enormity of the abyss loomed larger, daring them to step closer. Eric's grip tightened, unwavering. "We have to confront it. We can't let it win." With nothing but determination lighting their way, they approached the edge of the chasm. The air was frigid, tinged with despair, as if the darkness itself was reaching out to snatch their very essence. Below, shadows writhed like serpents, coalescing into a mass of chaotic energy. It felt as if the glutton itself was waiting, taunting them to jump and become one with the void. Jean's thoughts raced. What if this was a trap? What if stepping into the darkness only meant they would disappear forever? Yet the memory of the shattered mirrors reminded her of her strength. "We can't let it take us," she breathed, heart pounding with defiance. "Together," Eric shouted, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "We leaped together." With a surge of adrenaline, they both stepped toward the edge, ready to jump. But then, something shifted. The ground rumbled again, and the shadows surged upward like a tidal wave. "Hold on," Eric yelled, pulling Jean back just in time as the earth around them crumbled, sending dirt and debris cascading into the abyss. "What was that?" she gasped, her breath hitching as panic surged through her. "It's fighting back," Eric replied, his gaze unwavering. "We can't let it break us. We have to push through." He stepped forward again, and Jean felt the weight of the moment hang heavily. The glutton's face rippled up from the abyss, a monstrous visage of despair and anger. "You think you can defeat me?" It roared, its voice reverberating through the emptiness. "You are bound to me. Your fears, your doubts, they define you." "No," Jean shouted, feeling the swelling power of her realization. "You are not my master." The shadows recoiled slightly, threatening to retreat as her words rang clear. Eric took her hand tighter, and together, they faced the darkness. "We are more than our past," he proclaimed, spurring her resolve. But as they stood united, ready to confront the glutton, a chilling wind swept through the chasm, stirring the shadows into a frenzy. With it came whispers, voices from Jean's past, echoing her insecurities, twisting her memories. "You don't belong. You'll never be free," they taunted. The sound was deafening, and suddenly, Jean faltered. Her resolve wavered, the weight of the echoes threatening to drown her. She squeezed her eyes shut, clinging to Eric's hand. I don't know if I'm strong enough." "Listen to me," Eric shouted over the chaos. "You are strong. Remember what you've overcome." A flicker of light ignited within her, a memory of her journey, of battles fought and fears conquered. The memory of the shattered mirrors resonated, reminding her of who she truly was. Just as the darkness threatened to swallow her whole, Jean opened her eyes, a spark igniting in her heart. "You're right," she whispered fiercely. "I won't be afraid anymore." With that declaration, a blinding light erupted from within them, illuminating the abyss. The shadows recoiled, baring their teeth like wild animals. "What is this?" the glutton hissed, its confidence faltering. As light enveloped them, Jean and Eric stood unwavering, ready to face the darkness that had haunted them for so long. But just as victory seemed within reach, an unearthly roar pierced the air, sending tremors through the ground. "What is happening?" Jean shouted, fear creeping back in. "Keep pushing," Eric urged, as the light threatened to flicker. "We have to take back our power." But as the shadows surged one last time, a chilling reality dawned upon them. Would their newfound strength be enough to vanquish the glutton? Or was this only the prelude to a battle far greater than they could ever imagine? As the darkness writhed, pulling at the edges of their light, they stood on the precipice of understanding, the window to a truth that could change their lives forever. The chasm roared as darkness writhed and twisted, desperate to reclaim what it had lost. Jean stood firm, heart racing, but a new fire ignited within her. Eric's presence anchored her as they faced the glutton together. "You will never break us," Jean declared, courage flooding each syllable. "We are not your playthings." The shadows pulsed, angry and chaotic. "You think you can defy your own desires? They will consume you. You are bound to me through your fear, your hunger." Feeling Eric's grip tighten, Jean steeled herself, reminding herself of their journey. Every misstep, every fear, had led her here. She wasn't just running. She was fighting for her hopes and dreams tangled in a web of shadows. "Enough," she shouted, and with a quick glance at Eric, she felt the collective strength of every moment of clarity warm her very core. "We reject you." In that moment of unity, they called upon each piece of their resolve, drawing it deep from within. Light burst forth from their hands, illuminating the darkness with a blinding brilliance that drove the shadows back. The glutton howled as light cut through the suffocating gloom. Every inch of the chasm trembled, and Jean's heart soared. The shadows twisted violently, echoing with rage. "You can't escape. I will find you again. I will choose my own path," Jean declared. Knowing in her heart the darkness was but a fragment of her past, a story she had the power to retell. "Together," Eric yelled, his voice ringing clear above the chaos. "Push through." With every ounce of strength, they unleashed the light, feeding into the pulsating energy swirling around them, melding their hopes, dreams, and memories into an unstoppable force. The gluttonous form began to dissipate, shrieking as it tried to claw back to what it once consumed. Become one with the shadows. It roared, but the light was relentless, chiseling away at its very essence. The chasm exploded around them, and for a heartbeat, time felt suspended. Jean and Eric leaned into the warm glow, feeling the shadows pull back, surrendering to the power of their fight. The world around twisted and turned, and then it shattered like glass. The remnants of darkness evaporated into the air, dissipating like a bad dream, revealing an expansive sky painted with stars, bright and alluring. "We did it," Eric exhaled, awe in his voice. "Yes, we broke free," Jean laughed. But even as they reveled in their victory, a flicker of doubt crept back. "Will it be back?" she wondered aloud, glancing over her shoulder at the fading shadows. "I don't know," Eric admitted, his brow furrowed. "But we faced it together. We can do it again if we have to." Jean felt a warmth settle in her chest. No matter what lay ahead, they had discovered something invaluable. Their own inner strength and the importance of confronting their truths. The night unfolded like a soft embrace, a blanket of serenity that washed over her. They defaced the darkness, refused to be consumed, and emerged reborn. As they made their way into the town with tentative steps, the air felt lighter, bathed in the aftermath of their triumph. "I never want to forget this," Jean said, looking up at the starry sky. "Neither do I," Eric replied, shooting her a smile that filled her with hope. Stepping into the light, they shared a quiet understanding that life would always pose challenges. But now, bolstered by their united fight against fear, they were ready for whatever reality would throw their way. And with that, they walked forward, hand in hand, the memories of the angelic sins replaced by hope and resilience. They left behind the darkness not as victims, but as survivors, ready to face a new dawn. Don't wait any longer. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will take you to the edge of your seat. Smash that like button to feast the algorithm and keep this amazing community thriving. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about the ending. What do you think happened to the glutton? And most importantly, share this video immediately with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Remember, true fans show their support. This is the moment to take action.